Welcome back to the Open Up Podcast, everyone. It's episode 46 with host of WA Real, the show bringing real and authentic stories from the most inspiring people in Western Australia. My man, the man in the red vest, Bryn Edwards. Thank you for doing this, brother.
No worries. It's lovely to be able to reciprocate having had you on my podcast a couple of weeks ago.
It's awesome, man. I appreciate it big time, hey.
You're very welcome.
We're going to dive straight in, and question off the bat, can you describe yourself to us as a man, as a human?
As a man, as a human, that's a toughie. That's a pretty good one straight off the bat. Describe myself. Relentlessly developing.
That's cool.
Yeah, work in progress.
That's so cool, man. Haven't had that one yet.
Yeah, I'm never going to be the finished article. It's just non-stop, and I'm good with that.
Yeah. I think if people try and reach an end goal, that's where you become stagnant and sort of start to question yourself.
Yeah, one of the a couple of things that I've sort of challenges that I've undertaken, and some of my guests who've undertaken big challenges, often the common thread you find is it's the process. It's not the outcome. It's the process that's exciting.
100%.
Yeah.
We're going to dive straight into your childhood. Obviously, the first story that you're here to share, it starts at about 39 years old, but we're going to delve a little bit into your childhood, what the family dynamic was like. Can you give us a quick summary or breakdown of that?
Yeah, childhood for me was a bit of a dichotomy in the fact that I had a loving family. They were awesome. I couldn't ask for anything better. My mum and dad are just amazing individuals, full of love. They had me when they were quite young, and I really take my hats off to them. I think they were like 22. So I had my daughter when I was 32, and I thought I was just about ready. 10 years early would have been a nightmare. I think they had a lot of figuring out to do. But I was quite young. I don't really remember that. I know Dad was still sort of playing rugby, enjoying himself, and frequently I'd be taken to the pub, etc., in a pram and just left in the car in innocent times. But the dichotomy was at the age of 8. Mum and Dad made the very brave decision to send me away to school. So I'm originally from England, so I went to an English boys' boarding school where, from the age of 8 to 13, I was there most of the week, Monday to Friday, and then from 13 to 18, I'd be there for 3 to 4 to 5 weeks at a time, which meant that I was in this extraordinarily rigorous, elitist environment. That was just, you were being processed. And then when I wasn't there, I was in this very lovely, loving environment. So there were two dichotomous things going on. But I know that going away to school, certainly at the age of 8, I know it caused me an amount of, I still come back to it. There is a degree of trauma around it, which you bring
like
back.
You weren't good enough?
No, it's a good question actually. You wonder why you went. Like, I know why my parents sent me, right, and that's not up for debate. It wasn't. It came from a loving place. It came from a wanting the best for me. So that's not up for debate. And I know it was hard on both of them, like my mother particularly. Yeah. And she was choosing tears for days afterwards when, we got this picture of me in this like uniform and hat and, typical English with a briefcase. And there's this look on my face. It's just, what the hell are you doing to me? At the age of 8. It was interesting.
Cool. Were your family well off to send you to that school?
Yeah, relatively. It was, I think part of it was done through my grandfather at the time, which I understand there was some sort of tax breaks to it and this, that and the other. And I think my grandfather was actually quite a a leading decider in it, actually. If we peel it back, because he wasn't a forceful character, but he had some very fixed views. So yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, look, I got the most out of my childhood. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was bad or anything truly bad happened to me. I got on with it and I got the most out of it. You know, there was lots of opportunities in going to an environment like that, but at the same time, you don't quite appreciate what you're missing from a developmental point of view, from just having your loved ones close all the time. You become extraordinarily resilient and self-reliant very early. You know, there's times when I can be impenetrable and stuff like that, but there's times, I wasn't always very good at connecting with people as well. So just because you had to look after yourself.
Do you feel like you could be yourself in that environment? Obviously, like growing up in it, it'd be second nature, but
no, and that's one of the interesting. That's a really interesting question, Lachlan. Because there was always this core bit of me which I had to keep shielded, right? You know, like people think going to an English boarding school is all like silk pajamas and pillows and stuff like that. It's not, and nor is it in this endless like Borstal fist fest either. In fact, if you got into a fight, you'd lost. Right. Yeah. Because the way it would work is that generally would be all right. Like you're in a dorm with like 8 to 10 other kids. Generally things are all right, but you'd only got to have one that showed a little bit of weakness and everyone will start nipping at it. And it's nipping at it verbally. And then if you showed a little bit more weakness, then everybody would come in a bit more and a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And if you actually got that person to swing a fist at you, you'd won and they'd lost. That was it. It didn't matter whether they connected or anything, right? And it was a strange thing that if you did actually get smacked in the face, which I did from time to time, because you nipped at someone and got them, it really didn't actually hurt, which sounds really quite perverse. So one of the things that I actually developed from going to being in that environment was this ability to really find buttons and press them, right? And not for good. Yeah. It's a skill set that it's a skill set that I didn't really want to get rid of in an adult. But what I tend to do now is I gently go and press people's buttons to get to know them. Okay. And there's almost this sickly playful part of me, and my fiance tells me to stop it at times, where I'll playfully massage someone's button and I'll let them know that I'm doing it, almost as in, if I go any further, I could really wind you up. But I remember not so long ago, about 3 or 4 years ago at work, where pressure situation and somebody just wasn't performing and this, that and the other and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I went and old public school Bryn came out. And this bloke looked at me and said, I'm going to have to go and walk around the block or I'm going to hit you. Like this. And I was like, I've won. Yeah. So, yeah, look, it's a unique environment, that was. It's the best way I could describe it is it's somewhere between the military and prison.
Yeah, so one last question about that time.
Yeah.
I think you said you couldn't be yourself in that environment. Who were you? Who do you feel you really were, and like what did you have to be?
Is that as in who did I have to present, or who was I at my core?
Yeah, who were you at your core, and then was it just you presenting this person who could engage in that banter? Was that the mask you had to put on?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, and one that I've sort of unravelled itself later in life, in my 30s, was I don't know the answer to your question, and that was the most concerning thing. I never quite understood who I was and what I truly wanted. I wanted connection. Yeah. And I wanted love, which is where I came from, out of the family womb, as it were. But you weren't going to get that at school. You'd get acknowledgement. I think the best time we got, and you'll relate to this, coming from New Zealand, the most amount of connection I had was when I played rugby.
Yeah.
Because you'd been into battle with 14 other dudes, and you're like, yeah, you're like, yeah, tribal power, and I loved it. And I think that's one of the things I really love. That's when you actually were very true with one another in that environment, because you kind of had to be in its own way.
Yeah.
But the rest of the time, I don't really know the answer, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Who was Bryn? I was a number of things. I was at times I was very amusing and enigmatic, but then I was very withdrawn. A lot of guys, like when we got to 15, we started to have, instead of being dormitories, we had like studies, and you were in pairs. And in the house that I was in, there was an odd number, and there was no question that Bryn was going to be in his own study, because Bryn needs to have his own time, because I retreat and I come out. So, some evenings after you've done a couple of hours of homework, go and play with the guys doing stuff. Other evenings, it'd be like, I'm just going to walk around the grounds and I'm just not going to talk to you. And yeah, there was this pull towards, there's this inner person and there's this outer person, but this inner person, you try a lot of things, you try and work it out.
That's cool that you're self-aware enough to actually identify that you don't know who you were.
No.
That's cool, man. I think we're going to switch gears and fast forward to the story that you're going to share with us today. Do you want to walk us through that?
Yeah, so look, the 23rd of December 2013 was like a pivotal day. It's one me and my family amusingly refer to as shit sticks. Basically, it's a couple of days before Christmas. I'm back in England. I moved to Australia in 2010 with my daughter, who was 3 at the time, and I was with her mother. And on that day, we were all getting ready to go out for the Sunday dinner before Christmas. Everyone's excited because I'm back. Da 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 da. And then my daughter's mum walks in with my iPad and says, "Who's this email from?" And that's when my sort of I think it's my 5-month affair became known. Wow. Like just before you go out for a big family dinner, or just before Christmas, and this, that, and the other, and that sparked the start of the unraveling of all the decisions I'd never made, all the things that I'd swept under the carpet, all of the lack of knowledge about myself and who I was and what I wanted, and let alone for the stuff that I did know about myself, standing up for it.
Wow. Actually
standing up for it. And that started the period of this huge unraveling. So from that period, I sort of battled out the rest of that holiday with a short stay in Singapore on the way back to Western Australia, where, look, as soon as you get sprung, I mean, like I've said before, I'm not going to dress it up like I'm not, right? I was the cliche, I was the poster boy for a cliche midlife crisis. There I am, 39, affair, younger woman, 10 years younger than me. Wow. It's the archetype, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, I tried to dress it up like it wasn't, and then it unraveled, and, in typical Bryn style, it's like, try and manage the situation and try and make everybody else all right. And in doing that, the truth started to ebb out as more emails were found, and this, that, and the other. And then, like, the true extent of what had been going on, which was, pretty... You couldn't dress it up like it's not. It was pretty sordid. Yeah. All sorts was going on, and it became more and more and more laid bare, but not by me doing it. And then I left the house. Originally, I was just going to stop at someone's house for 2 weeks, and then realised I wasn't doing that. I then found a little place, like my daughter's mother at the time was living in Fremantle, so I found a place just in South Fremantle, small little place, and you're having to tell your daughter, Dad's not coming home. She's 7. That's and she's just like fucking everything to me, and you know what you're doing, you know, you've fucked that up, and then you know there I am in this shitty little place, and it's like, what the fuck's just happened, like, and yeah, it's just like, just what, like, not that long ago it was all, you know, I had a good job, we just bought an investment property, but it just, it wasn't right.
Yeah.
And you know, I was persevering, I wasn't putting myself first, I wasn't standing up for myself, in that sphere, and yeah, it all caught up with me.
Okay.
And you know, then you enter this incredible period of shame and guilt,
Yeah, of
which
course.
went on for a good year, and you know, during that, you're trying to rationalize and explain it to your 7-year-old daughter who just doesn't get it. You've got a very, very, very angry, jilted woman on the other side who's just like, "Ugh." And you know, there's lots of things about our relationship that weren't correct. And look, we went through an amount of couples counselling, and I wanted to get to a place of honesty of trying to get into, you know, why has this happened, where is it, and this, and we just weren't getting there. And yeah, then it came to the point where I think one of the bravest things I had to do several months later was actually go and see my partner and say, like, that's, you know, I'm not coming back.
Okay.
And that was pretty, yeah. And then from there, I became the shell of the person that I was before, which in hindsight is probably correct, because the person I was before, it was time for that shell to depart.
Yeah.
But you know, you're in this place of shame and guilt, and you can't seem to make decisions. The weight of the world's on you. You know, all the humor in life is gone, and you know, I'm taking on. You know, I was still financially responsible for my daughter's mum, where I was living, this, that, and the other, and you're just, you know, and I kept trying to press some of the buttons that would make me feel better, but they weren't. So, you know, I was still seeing my fairy, which probably was not the right thing to be doing. I was trying to, you know, see where that was supposed to go, but I now realise that was a catalyst, and it had played its part. And yeah, I also went to see a counsellor at that time in South Fremantle, who it probably wasn't the best for me at the time, but he just kept leading me to these points of where I was almost feeling like full of despair and self-loathing and just generally crap about myself, and then just leaving me there going, so what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. And you know, I've got him going, what are you going to do? I've got my daughter saying, at that time I was living in a really small place and she couldn't stay, and she's like, when can I stay, Dad? I'll just sleep in the bed with you. I was like, no. And I got, you know, an ex, what's happening, and the whole world, as well as, you know, you know, decent level job, and everyone's there, and just everybody wanting a piece of you. Everybody. I remember at one point, right, you know, can you remember there was a point when Britney Spears fell off the rails and she shaved her head?
Yeah.
Like, I get it. There was one day where I stood there with my shaver. I was like, I was going to do it. I'll just take all my hair off. And I couldn't work out why. And it was just like this enormous cry for help. Will someone help me? And then the other thing is that, you know, the core group, the source of love, which could help me, 10,000 miles away. They're in England. Like, they're on the phone, but they're not there. And, you know, all of a sudden, I'm the other side of the world. I'm in this place of shame and guilt. I'm totally alone. Because the friends that I do have are pretty much related to the life I've just left. I hadn't really developed many friends of my own. And, yeah, and it was just pretty fucking dark and pretty lonely. and I just felt like the whole world was a bunch of piranhas and they were nipping at me, and I was wondering how long it was going to be until there was nothing left
Yeah.
for them to nip at.
Jeez. So was that your lowest of the lows, you think?
Yeah.
Okay. Before we move on to like
Yeah.
how you overcame it, then I've got a few questions to ask you about that story. When you initially got sprung, did you deny it at all, or did you accept that responsibility up front? Because I can't imagine myself, the person I was, ever accepting responsibility for that up front. I would have denied that shit to the end.
In true former Bryn style, I did the greyness in the middle
Yeah.
because I didn't have the bollocks to do one or the other.
Yeah.
I didn't deny it. Well, I couldn't because it's an email with I love you, miss you. So it's like, yeah, you can't just knock that off. But I did greyness, and I didn't say, yeah, I've been doing this, and I'm not happy. You know, everybody sort of says, well, not everybody, but well, you look back at it, and you know, the right thing to do is as soon as you realise you're not in the right place, you should go and have a conversation and sort things out, and either go one way or the other. And it just doesn't work like that. And I think if it happens like that, then you're a better man than I was at that point. But I think it was a huge indicator of something not being right. And so yeah, when sprung, I just downplayed it. I was like, oh yeah, well there was this girl, she had a shine. I was a bit drunk, we had a kiss. I was like, what? And it's like, yeah. And then like we go off for lunch, and she's like, I'm going to come down later. And then she comes down later to have lunch, and she's found more emails, and they're getting, and then a few days later we fly back to Western Australia via Singapore, and I'm asleep, and she's been up, and she's gone through my Hotmail account, and then it's really interesting because when the affair first started, you sort of, you're like super cagey. Everything gets deleted. Everything, like you're meticulous about it. And then after a period of time, it just carries on, and you just get a bit blasé.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah. And I got really blasé, as in I can hide things in plain sight. No one's got. Yeah, everybody freaking knew. Everybody knew in a sort of work setting, because there was that sort of work relationship-ish type thing going on. And yeah, and then you start to get blasé, and that's when I have this theory that I have a greater total self, right? And this is it's not me abdicating responsibility for any of it, but I have a greater total self, and my greater total self started to take over and guide my hand during that period to put me into that place, to have an affair, to get busted, to blow up a place that I was not happy with, if that makes sense. It's me on a bigger scale. Okay. The affair gets initiated because somebody offers up sex, and you're like, oh no, and then you're like, yeah. And it's like, whoa, why am I saying yeah? And then all of a sudden it's happening, and you're like, what? And you're like, why is this happening? And you've gone and you've done it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but that's your greater total self taking over executive functioning in that, look, Bryn, you've been in this place that you haven't stood up for yourself. You're not being respected on the other side. And so now we're going to put you in a place where you destroy all the rest of the trust. And we're going to destroy this because you've not listened to anything I've said beforehand. You've not listened to any intuition or anything. So we're going to do that. So I can say that eloquently now, but at the time I was just scared. And so it's like, oh, I've been busted. And, I went and had a chat with my dad straight away. And then, but then I left the family, went back, Singapore, Western Australia, and just more and more emails are being found, more and more emails are being read, and just the full extent of what's been going on came out, and all the time I didn't deny it, but I didn't really man up and say.
How long was it
Say,
until
yeah.
you admitted it or accepted
Well,
responsibility for it?
there's two answers there. How long was it until I admitted it? It sort of admitted it. It sort of admitted itself.
Okay, yeah.
Because of the trail of emails and messages and stuff that were just found and read. I kept transcripts of like instant chat stuff that was going on. I don't know why I kept it, but I did. And then they were found and they were read, and I didn't leave a lot to the imagination. And yeah, it took some time. I was apologetic. I was very, very apologetic. But it was difficult. But also there was that whole bit of, but you've been a shit as well.
Yeah.
So it was like, and the interesting thing is that, it was about a year later after one event when my family had come over that somebody actually floated past me that maybe my former partner may demonstrate borderline or narcissistic behavioural traits. And so I started reading up about it, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this sounds... Because there was something about my partner, the behaviour that just wasn't right. I would always be wrong. There'd be dramas from nowhere. I got alienated from friends. There's lots and lots of little things which just never felt right. And I just think, oh, I'm a good bloke. Why am I being treated like this? And I always thought, oh, things will get better. Things will get better. And I always got promised, if this, then we'll get better. If this will get better. And she came across as being a very firm and enigmatic person when we first got together, my former partner, and I got swept up in it. But then I realised where that came from. And so while I was in quite a dark and shame and guilt laden place, to have that set of behavioural traits coming down on you, it's freaking rough.
Yeah.
And
have you ever accepted like full responsibility for what you did, or?
Yeah, I think
like without blaming it on the narcissism.
Yeah, well, this was the point. This was the bit that I got to. It was from that sort of our couples counsellor later on sort of told me that I was probably on the money with that, which was a relief. But then it wasn't anymore, because it's really easy if somebody's got a set of wonky behaviours to start blaming them and go, oh yeah, well they're like that, so yeah, that just abdicates me of any responsibility. But that just doesn't help. And I went through this whole thing of, well, I chose to be in that situation. Yeah. I chose to stay in there. And I chose to keep going back in and going back in and going back in and going back in and keeping myself in a shitty situation. And that's when I realised, Jesus Christ, I'm not surprised my greater total self took over and said, we're going to do something to blow this up, because otherwise you're just going to keep going and going and going and going, and you're just going to destruct or something. Yeah. And so, yeah, I absolutely take responsibility for all of it. I think because I like to look back at previous behaviours, previous choices and behaviours, I realised that it was my responsibility because I chose to get into that relation right at the very start.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, everything else that ensued came from that, and I was responsible for. And I am 100% responsible for, well, yeah, I'm 100% responsible for the affair, absolutely. And I'm 100% responsible for my conduct throughout our relationship, and all the things that I did do and all the things that I didn't do.
That's awesome to hear, man. That's powerful. And I only asked that because, similar situation with my daughter's mum, where it literally took me years to accept the fact that I was the pig in the relationship. No matter how much I resented her, no matter how much I felt it was toxic because of her, once I come to the realization that it was solely on me and that I took those actions, that's when I could finally send compassion and love to her for what I'd done to her.
Yeah, I mean, it's like my former partner rubbed up a lot of people the wrong way.
Yeah.
Like my family, me, my friends, alienated me from friends in England. It didn't make making genuine new friends when I came to Australia. Yeah, all of this sort of stuff, right? And she still continues to do it this day. Don't get me wrong. But that would make life really easy, and I'd miss the bigger point, which is exactly what I think you just illustrated, which is that it really doesn't matter what her behaviours are like. And this is how I've got to a really good place in life now. Is, you know, the evidence would suggest that she still carries a lot of anger towards me, and you know, and does all this. It really doesn't matter now. I do send her compassion. I do wish her well on her journey. Yet, you know, through that, I've exposed some of the darkest parts of me, and I prided myself on being a good bloke.
Yeah.
Right. I prided myself on being the guy that, you know, went to a good school, played rugby, did the right thing, went to university, did some traveling, you know, never pissed anybody off. Seldom outside of a rugby pitch have I ever been in a fight.
Yeah.
Tried to do the honourable thing. Worked hard in all the jobs I had. Looked after my family, provided, loved my daughter. All of that. Pride on being, you know, the good, upstanding member of the community.
Yeah. And
then I blew it all up. So, you know, and then I went and lived with that for some time, and it's kind of like, well, you're not. And one of the things one of the pivotal bits that started to move me out of that was reading a book called Becoming, which broke down in simple form Carl Jung's process of individuation, which is part of it is beginning to accept that you've got a light side and you've got a shadow side. And you need to learn to love both and integrate both. And that's been hard, but it's been so liberating to take responsibility, to love all of yourself. You know, even the bits that are dark. And, you know, it would be easy just to like sweep the past under the carpet, but then I would only be repeating the cycle again.
Yeah.
And so that's why, you know, I'm all good now to come and start WA Real. And, you know, my very first episode, boom, I use those words, you know, poster boy for a cliche midlife crisis. I did not flinch from that. I'll talk about it now because it happens.
Yeah.
You know.
And to ignore the dark would be burying it. And, you know, the dark is what we more often than not learn from. So how can you grow without accepting the dark parts of you?
Absolutely.
There's one question or two questions I want to ask about like that affair, just because I know I've been in a similar situation. Not quite affair, but treated someone poorly. Obviously, you felt like you were a good bloke at your core, but you were having this affair. Like, did you feel like a fraud during that period? Because you had this, you know, you had this picture of yourself as a good bloke, but, you know, secretly behind the scenes, you're having this affair.
Look, I've worked out the dynamics of how my affair started, right?
Yeah.
And having spoken to the odd person who's been in a similar situation, that sort of happened to them as well. You're in a place that's not good, right? So obviously my relationship with daughter's mother was not in a good place. There was an erosion of trust anyway. There was anger floating around. There was all sorts of stuff, right? And instead of getting head on into it, and this, that, and the other, you know, what happens is you talk one day about something not being so good. You know, you go to work and you're kind of like, you know, you present your work facade. particularly in the corporate environment that I was working in previously. And you present that, and then all of a sudden, whether it's over coffee or something like that, you just give you give away a bit of like, oh yeah, but this is not so good. There's a da. And then someone picks up on that, and then they talk to you about it, right? Or they just waft a bit of acknowledgement your way, right? And you get a bit of attention and a bit of focus, and it's something that you've not had for a long time.
It's like
and we all want. Yes. It'd be very easy to say affairs are about sex, because often that has a lot to do with it. Yet at times you start and then slowly but surely there's this snowball effect of, yeah, well, I'm not getting this, and and this is that, and this is a bit shit, this is a bit shit, and then the other person like, oh, this is a bit shit, this is a bit shit, this is a bit shit. So if you're getting this drug and you want more of it, and the other person's actually told, you don't need to be a public schoolboy, trying to find people's buttons to press, because they're just laying them out there in terms of, oh, well, I'm not getting this, I'm not getting this, I'm not getting this. So all of a sudden you just do something that's like the thing that you're not getting, and you'll get more attention.
Yeah.
And then that goes both ways. Do you know what I mean? So essentially what you're doing is you're just giving each other a deficit of stuff that you haven't had before, or not before, for a while, that you've lost connection with, and this, that, and the other. And then it's like, oh, I like this, I missed this, I want some more of this, I want some more of this, I want some more. So you're right, you get very addicted.
Cool. Your ones, I think it's different for you. Yours seems like what you were doing was primarily because you needed to, or you were attracted to filling that void, something like this emotional need that you needed to fill that wasn't being fulfilled in your current relationship, whereas mine was literally just to feed my ego.
Right.
Because I needed to be validated, because I felt like I wasn't enough.
I think one of the most interesting pieces of self-work that I did with a counsellor, and it's not the one I mentioned before, because later on I went and found somebody who could properly help me with everything that was going on. But one of the biggest things that we got into was, we started, and I did a bit of journaling work on this, and then I had this almighty moment, was understanding how I went about picking partners and what it was I was doing in that interaction.
Yeah.
And in essence, it was this, right? And I don't know how I came to this point. And to be honest, I don't really care, because I identified it. So as soon as you identify it, it's like, let's try and work it out. So it was basically this. I would look for someone and try and find something within them quite quickly that was, I think my counsellor and I called it like the bird with slightly broken wing, yeah. Right? And then my role was to come and help them with this. And if I was to help them with their broken wing, or help them in some way, or be useful or helpful to them in whatever way, then they would give me the attention, the love, sex and stuff like that. And that would be good, because they're the things that I crave for. And, I've been craving that right back to school time.
Okay.
So if I could be helpful, or this, that, and the other, then that's, so if you think about it, you're going into a relationship, a long-term relationship, not because you want to be helpful.
Yeah.
You want to feel important from being useful or helpful, or being able to help someone. And if they get this whole, oh wow, you've really helped me with that, I will now shower some attention upon you. It's like, oh great. So you're constantly trying to please people.
Yeah.
and being a people pleaser and this, that, and the other, which is why, when affairs come out, you're like, oh, no, it's all right. No, it wasn't this big. It wasn't that bad. So, yeah. And, one of the bits that really turned it around was I had that ha-ha moment. But then one of the things that happened back in 2015 was I went back to the family cup. And I went back to England for 4 weeks, and I just had the best time with my family and the loved ones and the closest ones around me.
Yeah.
And then when I returned from that, I sat with my counsellor, and he said, so how was the trip back to England? I just bawled. And he was like, what's up? And I was like, you know what? I'm a lovely bloke. I'm deserving of love, and I'm capable of loving people. And I'm able to do that by just being me. And then the full turnabout came probably sometime after that, when my parents came back over, probably more 2016. And at that time, I'd sort of re-entered the dating scene, as it was.
Yeah.
And my old man said to me, because they've been together since they were 14, and the old man says, what's it like going out there and dating at the age of 40? And I went, it's easy. I said, why is that? He goes, well, I just turn up and I just present me, right? And if it's not enough, it doesn't matter. Because I know what it looks like if you present anything less than your genuine self, right? Yeah. If you present anything less than your genuine self, if you're anything less than honest, right? Anything less than that, then you're going to end up in that shit situation, which will lead to convenient truth and not telling the full honesty of a situation, and not being open and transparent. And then in there, where the darkness will start to set in, and then from that, strange behaviours will happen. You won't start talking, and this, that, and the other, and then it'll escalate into an affair, and a shitty situation, which I've just managed to sort myself out from, and be good about myself. And I kind of like being good about myself. So there's no freaking way I'm going to compromise that by just turning up. And, it doesn't matter if, I'm sitting having an initial coffee or cup of tea with a young lady and she's the most drop dead gorgeous person in the world. But if I don't resonate because I'm being totally open and honest and it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. Because that, and if you track back to it when we're young blokes, it's kind of like, certainly for me, it's kind of like, oh, look at that attractive girlfriend. What do I need to do to impress her, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's very simple. You turn up as yourself, and if it doesn't impress her, it doesn't matter, right? But nobody imbues us with this great knowledge when we're 20 years old too.
Being a people pleaser, do you feel like that was the case with your former relationship?
Yeah, and I think what I inadvertently managed to do by selecting the partner that I did with the behavioural traits that she has was I created the perfect storm of somebody who's a people pleaser and somebody who will just take from that. So there's this perfect storm, it's been really hard, right? I see other separated couples who just seem to have got on with their life, but mine's been really, really hard, and a lot of it is because I've not stood up for myself. I could have probably sorted it out, but in a strange way, certainly in my journaling, when I write down my gratitude, I'm grateful for that perfect storm.
Yeah.
I am grateful that it happened, of having my set of behaviours and then them being, I don't want to say preyed upon, but they sort of were by a set of behavioural traits that will just relentlessly take from that.
Yeah.
And I'm eternally grateful, because in having to break that cycle, in having to stand up for myself, in having to stand up for what I believe in, I have found aspects of myself which I never knew. I found resources in myself that I never knew. I've been able to harness parts of myself that I was scared of. Yeah.
Cool.
Um,
Looking like knowing that you were a people pleaser, having gone through counselling, having done all this like self work now, do you have an understanding of where this people pleasing come from? Was it because you had to be someone when you were at home for those weekends or for those weeks as you got older to please your parents?
it's a good question. My mum's a little bit of a people pleaser, so there will have been some role modelling,
Yeah.
right? Um, Bless her, she is. And she recognises it. You know, now we talk about it and joke. Um, so there was some role modelling. I don't know. I still think there's got to be some trauma in there that the 8-year-old me who was put into a boarding school went, what have I done wrong?
Yeah.
And kind of please my way out of it. and then also just like being shit scared of all these people around you, you know, older kids, housemasters, teachers, matrons who, you know, it's not the friendly little school I was in beforehand, but like this,
Yeah.
like proper hardcore old school English stoic, and you're like, oh, trying to please, and you didn't want to. I didn't want to get in trouble. You know, I was never a rebel. I was a non-conformist. Like, I bend the rule, this and that. But I'm never going to break them, get myself in trouble. Didn't want that.
Did you ever, like you said, you went into this slump and the counsellor that you seen first would just leave you in this pit of despair? Was there ever any self-loathing or self-hate because of what you'd done?
Yeah, huge amounts. Huge amounts. I think even the selection of the place that I lived in was a manifestation of that.
That's what you deserved?
Yeah, it was. It was. And you know what? My fiance and I, in the early part of our relationship, we walked past it and I go, oh, there's the place of shame and guilt. and they got to a point where we walked past it and went, oh, there's a place of shame and guilt. She goes, I think you need to just let that go.
Yeah.
Right. You need to let it go. I mean, I was in that place. It was this big old, concrete Italian Fremantle place that was chopped up into 3 different places.
Yeah.
It would have been very regal in its day, but it certainly wasn't at this point. And you know, like the weeds were growing in through the windows and under the doors, and it was like the place nature was trying to take back. The fridge just clanked, and it was just
so not
shit.
only were you
And it wasn't
self-loathing, but you sort of manifested your own version
and
of it.
I kept myself there. You know, I kept it with the place I lived in. And the worst thing about that place, it was you know, this place had a second bedroom. So, you know, my poor daughter came and stayed with me. So she came, you know, bless her. She was optimistic through all of it. And I was like, Dad, you know, I can now stop with you now. Because in the last little place that you were in for a couple of months, I couldn't, and now I can, and I just want to be with you. And, you know, we'd do some painting and stuff. But I remember just looking around going, this is just shit. And then I remember my parents coming over, and they stopped in a place nearby and they came to look at it. And I just was like so ashamed. And the stupid thing was I was actually making really good money working at Chevron. And, you know, I could have easily stopped in somewhere that was really nice, really plush, this, that, and the other. You know, I never invited friends over. You know, the only person that really came over there was my daughter, my fairee for a period of time. You know, it was just me in there. And it was kind of a reflection of that's all you deserve right now.
Yeah.
You piece of shit.
Yeah, and the problem with having that negative self-talk or having that self-loathing is that you get stuck in that negative feedback loop where you're just affirming and reaffirming.
Yeah, you do. You just keep going round and round. You're doing the same thing. You put yourself in the same drama. You're getting the same angry all the time. And just life is joyless.
Yeah.
Absolutely joyless.
How long did it take you I'm assuming you've forgiven yourself. How long did it take you to get to that point?
Um, took me a good took me a good 2 or 3 years. Um, it There were sort of stages to it.
Yeah.
One of the key bits was, and it's sort of counterintuitive to the whole taking responsibility. I think I actually took too much responsibility at one point in that it was all my fault. And I had somebody say, when an affair happened, it's not just because, you go and have an affair. It's the most obvious thing.
Yeah.
Right. It is the most obvious thing. When you get busted, it is the most obvious thing. And yet, deep down that the reason why you did that was because there was a whole lot of things that weren't working. And that whole lot of things within that, there's 50% responsibility. And because it takes two to tango and all that stuff. But I think I was taking responsibility for the whole lot. And I think one of the things that really helped was that day when the previous couple counsellor, when I went to ask her for help because I suspected that my partner had these slightly different behavioural traits. Yep. And I went to see her just to ask for a reference for somebody who could help me with that. And when she said, yeah, you're right. And I didn't even go there for that, but she said, yeah, you're right. And it was a huge weight lifted off my shoulder. It's kind of like, right. So I can stop worrying about those behavioural traits. Was it me who brought that out of her? I think that's what I was most concerned about. And it turns out, no, that was actually just her stuff.
Okay. So you're worried that what you did had caused her to become like that?
Yeah, what I'd done during the course of the relationship, if that makes it clearer.
Yeah.
Because I realised deep down that I wasn't standing up for myself, I wasn't doing this, I wasn't doing that. But then, let's not forget, somebody else has to turn up. Yeah. And it's easy when you go to take responsibility for everything, to take responsibility for everything, including other people's behaviours. And it's kind of like, well, that is theirs.
Yeah, you just need to take responsibility for your role in what happened.
Correct. And I was overextending a bit. So there was almost like a release. And then with that release, I could really get into doing the work on me. So then it came to, well, why did I choose this person? How did I start this? Why? And that's when I started getting to, why am I choosing the people? Why have I chose the people? You start tracking back through a load of girlfriends. And there was one that stood out where we got on super well. And it was kind of like, well, that was when I just presented my genuine self.
Yeah.
Geez, right. And then that starts to proliferate in the rest of your life. So what if I just present my genuine self? And I was like, oh, and then some people might like me and some people might not like me. It's like, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to get used to that. And
that's powerful, man. To
it
do
is
that much self work, to do that much work on yourself, from being this pit of despair, like having self-loathing, hating yourself, and feeling that you only deserve this little room with weeds growing through the windows. I think from there to a point where you're so comfortable with yourself that you can turn up to a date and present that is super powerful, man. Most people never get to that point. Yeah,
and I think one of the things I did do, I look back at it now, was, I shoved myself in the place of shame and guilt, right? And physically manifested that around me and everything. But one of the easiest things to do, and I have seen it in other males and females around me who have separated, is, and a friend of mine described it perfectly, was they monkey bar themselves from one relationship to another. Yeah. Right? So how the monkey bars work. You got to grab one to grab the other, and you got to keep going to get from one place to the other. And so the easiest thing in the world would be to just, let's go to another one. 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 And you're only gonna cycle through the same shit. You just papering over the cracks. And so whilst the period of shame and guilt, and I put myself in the hole for a good period of time. I think I physically lived in the place of shame and guilt for 15 months before I then physically changed to a new place, which you came and recorded the podcast in. And it was like, no, now we're going forwards. Now we're going forwards. Now we're out of it. But, it was important. I had to be present with it. One of the things I learned to do was being okay with not being okay.
Yeah.
I had to sit with that shame and guilt. There's a lot of backlog that I had to deal with.
Yeah. Well, once you can accept it, then you can learn from it.
Yeah.
Going to be mindful of your time, brother. I know you've got about 10 or so minutes left.
Yep.
Have you forgiven yourself for that?
I've learned from it. Have I forgiven myself for it? Yeah. But I've also got to a place where it's hard to describe, where forgiveness is not the point.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Forgiveness is not the point. If I had to forgive it, then I'm still close to where I used to be.
Yeah.
Now, I'm here talking to you for an hour about stuff, and I'm talking about some of the places, the times where I acted very dishonorably. And I'm good with it. So
would it be better to say that you've learned
accepted
and grown and worked on yourself so much that you're so comfortable in the person that you are now, that you really are this good bloke who only shows his true self, that you're like so detached from that person you were then?
Oh, no. I sit here talking to you now as a good bloke and a complete wanker all rolled into one. Right? And I'm good with it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, forgiveness, I think, actually, this probably sums it up. Forgiveness means that I'm only living in the light side of me. Right? And looking back across into that darkness and going, oh, do you forgive yourself for doing that? I mean, yeah, you do have to forgive yourself. Granted, and that's absolutely true. But I think I've got to a point now where it's like, strangely enough, I'm grateful for it. The life I live now is awesome. It's been a dark part, but I had to go into the dark hole because I'd swept stuff under the carpet, or maybe that was the journey I chose, way back when. So yes, I do forgive myself.
Yes.
But I don't keep dwelling on the fact I have to forgive myself. It's now.
No, once you forgive yourself, that's it, man.
And so I'm off now, and so it is part of me. I am Bryn many things, including a former affairee, and I'm down with that.
Yeah. Well, look where it's got you, man. You've got WA Real. You're inspiring people by helping, facilitate the sharing of stories. You're very much the pioneer in this space, especially in WA and Australia. So without that, man, you wouldn't be changing lives.
Yeah, and it's much like yourself. You go to these very dark places, and then it's kind of like you feel obligated to do something with it. And mine is a textbook example of how to completely screw up a separation period. I don't want anyone else to go through that.
Yeah.
Again, I'll never be able to take anybody's pain away, but maybe I can accelerate the processing.
Exactly. Going to go over recovery, or what you use to overcome the struggle in your life, and probably go through it a little bit quicker because we've got about 5 to 10 minutes left.
Well, I'm probably good for a little bit longer, but no, fine.
So you said the first one was a book called Becoming?
Yes, that was a real gateway. Can't remember who wrote it, but essentially it breaks down the essence of Jung's work, which is about the process of individuation and an understanding the shadow and the light side of you.
Cool. And that's
and bringing it together.
And that's Carl Jung? Is that
yes?
Right? Okay, cool. And can you explain what he is to people who might not know?
So Carl Jung, for me, is probably one of the most pioneering psychologists when it comes to actually understanding the journey, the human experience and the human journey, in the fact that we enter the world and we try and identify and understand the world from making binary decisions. So the yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. I am this, I am that, I am this, I am not that. And in doing that, you get so far into your life by defining what you are, and by therefore what you're not.
Yeah.
But the true essence is that we're all of it. So even if you're not something, you are by very nature that. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm lazy, I'm active, I'm generous, I'm stingy. I'm freaking all of it. I'm very trustworthy. Yeah, I've betrayed trust.
Yeah.
And I am all of that. And so the process of individuation is almost that you get to a point where you've got a handle on your identity, you think, but then there's all this stuff in boxes that you've packed away that you said you're not, when really it needs time, and then they start to open, and then that's when you start to integrate and become whole, and you become good with all of yourself. And usually that point is round about, it's linked with midlife adjustment crisis, whatever you want to call it. But it sets it into context.
And so the second one you said was family support, and the third was the counsellor. And can you give us, I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, the realization that you had with this counsellor?
Yeah, I think family support is huge. If it's there, turn back to the love.
Yes.
In essence.
And it helps in person too.
Yeah. In essence, it's turn back to the love. If you can't turn back to the love in yourself, turn back to those that love you. It's the most painful thing to do when you're less than your great self. It really, really is, but it's exactly the thing you should do.
Do you feel do you feel like going back to your family is so powerful because you can be your true self?
Yes. And they remind me of that.
Yeah. That's cool.
And hold you accountable to that.
Yeah.
By the mere presence of remembering that. And it's important to do. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. Good. And then the counselling that you said, that was very good at just understanding patterns.
Cool.
It's very good at making it completely focused about me and not easy excuses outside of the world, understanding my patterns, and then and doing that in a way that I went to see a guy called Mark Joffe. He's excellent. He just was great at understanding some of the patterns that had started in childhood and how they manifest, in terms of attracting partners and being a pleaser and why those things would come about, and then putting them into context and doing it so I could understand it where they come from, understand it how they were playing out, understanding the outcomes of those patterns, so I could properly see it and feel it, and therefore it and done in a way whereby I wasn't shamed by it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, now I see the mistake I've made. Right, brilliant. I can get on. I can start to, right, what should we do? Like, how do I go and work on this? It wasn't like, and that is why you ended up in a affair. Oh God, shit, shame, stuff like that. It was really respectful and so huge amount of helped me with a huge amount of insight, not just so I knew about myself, but I can act more congruent.
Super powerful for anyone going through something who's going through a struggle that seems to just be compounding or seems to be happening over and over again, is going back throughout your life and throughout your childhood to see where this pattern of action started, so that you can understand why, so that you can look at it, so you can understand where it's come from, because that's probably the worst part about being out of alignment and acting in a way that you're not proud of, is when you don't understand why it's happening, you start loathing, like self-loathing and hating yourself.
And one of the biggest things that came out of all of this, and look, my little journey carried on when I lost my job not long. Just as I thought I was getting on an even keel, I lost my job some 2 years later, and it's like, crap, no, we're back in it again. But one of the things that between that and everything made me realise is just how much we are at the mercy of our own unconscious programming.
Yeah.
And part of the mission that sits deep down in me is to help people to become more conscious of their unconscious programming. That's cool. I was asked recently, the whole thing of, if you could have a superpower, what would it be? And everyone's going, I'd be invisible. I'd be able to fly. And it came around to me. And honestly, I'm not saying this to be twee. If I had a superpower, it would be I could put my hand on somebody, and any program that runs through them, which is not in alignment with their core self, would just leave. Right. If I could just do that, including myself, I'd do that. Jesus Christ, the world would be epic. I wouldn't need to fly. I probably could fly. I don't know. But if I could do that, I could have that as a superpower, and just not because I want to be famous, just because think what it'd be like. Everyone around you. No more fit, no more regular, none of that. Boom.
That's cool, man. Okay. Last recovery tool was journaling. Can you detail how you use it and how it's helped?
Look, journaling's been one of these things that right from when I was at school, I used to do. I've always had notebooks, right? And I in my 20s, I used to go traveling around the world, and I'd have like a journal that sort of wrote down, today I did this, I did this, I did this. That was my memory game. But then I would always have another notebook where these big, deep thoughts came up, and I've sort of over that time, I sort of went in and out of journaling, and it's one of these things whereby sometimes you look at it and go, but if you just sit there and write, it really doesn't matter. Just write about anything. Like, you'd be amazed what comes out 10 to 15 minutes later. And the interesting thing about it is you can go and do counselling, right? And counselling is awesome. It has its place. It's great for looking. It's great for looking at patterns and things like that, so understand where you are. Coaching and some of the stuff I want to start doing more is about present and future, and that's more where I'm orientated. But going back to counselling, is that it's a one-off event. You go there probably once a week, once every other week, this, that, and the other. If you want to go and tap into the cheapest counselling that you can get your hands on, go and buy a notebook and a piece of paper and a pen, right? Stuff that comes out there is mega. Go and or if you want to have some real fun, go and Google, Jung's way of interpreting dreams. Pull out the key components, then just start writing down what does that represent in my life. Just have a go. It's awesome, the stuff that turns up, and just write some stuff down. And then more recently, in the last year or so, it's become a little bit more focused. So it's a lot more in the morning. Get up in the morning. Although I've had a little break the last week or two, because I've undertaken another little project in my time, and so something had to give in terms of time. So the journey's like collapsed right down. But before, it was very much, what was my sleep like? What am I grateful for? What are some of my bigger goals and reflections and things like that? But it's super important, and it's also these things, right? These things, pens. They're the most incredible manifestation tool. You start writing stuff down, it starts happening.
That's it.
Maybe not in the way you want it to, but you actually get there.
Yeah, and it's important not to filter yourself when you journal too.
Yes, indeed.
Then you're just subduing everything and burying it still.
It's just for you. It's just for you. And then I think after a period of time, the other thing that's really aided is having a creative outlet. And it really doesn't matter what it is. I mean, for me, it's this now. It's talking to people and just being out there, and not being worried about who I am or what I say and this, that, and the other. But it's just creative and expressive. Not Not because I think the whole world has to listen to me. I'm not that arrogant, but I'm just sending out Bryn's frequency, Bryn's core vibrational frequency into the world. And if it resonates with you and it benefits you, awesome. You know, I often say to people in terms of WA Real podcast, it's kind of like, look, come and listen to a few. If you like them, awesome. Listen to some more. I've got stacked, I've got about 80 episodes. And we'll keep going. But if you don't, well, that's awesome too. Go and find the podcast that does resonate with you. But please, please, please don't go back to mainstream media.
Yeah. That's it, man. And the fact that you are sharing your story, that you are following this path, this is your creative outlet. When mental health does suddenly become something that is widely spoken about, that is mainstream, you're going to be an authority in the space. Like that's the lines I'm thinking along as well, is that I'm going to have this library of so many stories, so many people being vulnerable, that we're going to be the authority in the space and people are going to come to us. And
interesting thing happened when I lost my job and I went through this whole, right, shit, I've been doing this for 15 years and it doesn't make me happy. And I went through this whole existential crisis, which I won't go through now. And then it was like, right, I need to do something. And I felt like I needed to be of service. And so I almost executed old patterns again, right? So I have a master's degree in psychology, right? And then 3 years later, I went and did a master's degree in business psychology, which sort of underpinned being a business consultant for 15 years. And I think the reason why I wanted to do business psychology at the time, and I get it now, was because I didn't want to deal with the top and bottom 10%. I wanted to deal with the middle 80, right? And where could I find them? I find them at work. But unfortunately, not everybody is aligned with their work, and so you don't get the best out of them. So then when I was like, oh, what shall I do? Then it was almost like I applied to go and do a master's in clinical psychology. And I went and interviewed at all, like Curtin and Murdoch and all these places, and got interviewed, and I got turned down, and that bruised the ego a little bit. But I'm grateful now, because what was I doing? I was executing old patterns of, if you go to university, then you do that, and da 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 da. But I think you're absolutely right, Lachlan, in the fact that counsellors play a great role, and they do an awesome job, right? In what they do. So and psychologists, they do all this training and what have you. But one of the things that not getting into university and then doing this has done is, it's given me a stack of freedom to just go and, like, I can go and have a podcast for someone. I can go and ask some real searching questions, just like you've done to me. And you build up a pattern of questions after a while, like, oh, this works and that, and this unlocks a story, and this unlocks a person, and this unlocks this. And then after, just by doing it and doing it and doing it, because you want the best and you want people to move forwards. I think sometimes what I see, I had stuff to do with Relationships Australia with my separation, and it didn't really do a lot, because they're probably just processing people, and they're helping, but at the same time they're not really just and there's a struggle I have at times with we talk about mental health. When we talk about mental strength, what does that look like? Where do we go? And I'm not just talking mental strength as in, like this. I'm talking about the strength that you and I are now talking about, as in you've been through it. And I felt it when I sat with you. It's just like, whoa, here's a dude who's so cool in himself. Like, the strength just emanates. And to actually, that's what we need to be doing. That's what we need to be fostering in people when they're in the critical stages, and even when they're not in the critical stages. That's where the essence of it comes from. And I've got the WA part in my WA Real podcast for a purpose, because if I and you and other people can just raise everybody up to take that bit more responsibility, that bit more consciousness in WA, if we can just, if you, me, and everybody else like us who just actually want to go out there and just nudge the dial by about 2 to 5% on everybody. I mean, we're only talking 2.4 million people here. We're not talking a lot of people. 1.8 of them live in the metropolitan area. So it's 500,000 out in the sticks. It's 2.4 million. It's not a lot of people. If we can just nudge the dial on those 2.4 million, right, we'll be the coolest state, we'll be the coolest place on the planet, and people will flock to come here. I mean, we live in the most amazing place. The weather's awesome. You can get serenity and solitude like you can't get anywhere else on the planet for an hour and a half. And, it's fucking awesome living here, right? And if we can just nudge the dial on everybody that sets foot on this bit of the island, right, then we can just be freaking miles ahead. And, I like living here and I'm proud of it. And if I can play a role, you play a role, others like us play a role, and just nudging the dial on everybody.
Yeah, I think vulnerability, bro. If we're able to push this out, if we're able to make this mainstream somehow, us and everyone else who is doing what we're doing, there would be no war, there would be no animosity, no jealousy, because all of that comes from insecurity. All hate and toxicity comes from insecurity and not knowing how to deal with it. So vulnerability would negate all of that shit.
100%.
Couple quick fire questions, brother, then I'm going to wrap up and let you go.
Yeah, sure. Shoot.
Knowing everything that you've been through, what would you say the quality of your life is like now?
Oh, just light years, infinitely. It's it's new colours of the rainbow every single day.
That's awesome. What have you added to your life or removed from it that's improved the quality of it?
I think it's consistently turning into the love.
Cool.
Even when it's tricky.
Yeah.
And you want to keep it to yourself. And then what have I put else in it? Boundaries.
That's cool. That's powerful. People need that.
Yeah, my dad said to me actually many years ago. He said, "Kids, they need love and boundaries in equal measures."
What are you most grateful for right now?
What am I most grateful for right now? I'm grateful for the love from my fiance. I'm grateful for the huge amount of changing tumultuous stuff that's going on in my life right at this point right now. There is a lot of disruption in my life behind this microphone at the moment, and I'm grateful for all of it because I know I'm just knocking on the door of something awesome about to open.
Absolutely, man. I believe that 100%. Last question. If you had the chance to put a message on a billboard, somewhere thousands of people would see it every day, what would that message be, man?
A message on the billboard that everybody would say.
Everyone would see.
Everyone would see. Oh, that's good. I like that.
I stole that from Tim Ferriss. It's not mine.
Yeah, good. All right. A message on the billboard. I think it comes back to you are 100% responsible for who you are, your story, all the choices you've made, are making, and will make.
Boom.
And there you go.
My man, to wrap up, I just want to acknowledge you, first of all, for making the time to do this while you're at work. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
But most importantly, man, for having gone through this struggle, gone through everything you've been through, worked so much on yourself, and for now, not only sharing your story, but helping other people share theirs. You're going to make WA a better place. You're going to make the world a better place. So I'm grateful to not only know you, but to have you in this community, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Lachlan. And, super impressed with what you're doing here. And it's an absolute privilege to come on your podcast and talk. And, you're out there doing it.
Thank you, my man. You have a good
Cheers.
Monday.
Thanks.
See you, buddy.
See you.